All right, guys. I think it's fair to say that probably almost all of us would agree there are many, many things about governance in its modern form that we don't like. But probably one of the highest items on that list is that so much of governance is not really governance, but instead political theater. If the only political theater you really want to see is passage of the Clarity Act so that we can get on with our crypto lives, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. Let's see what we've got here. Fly Over Me says, like my ex moniker, it's all a play. Hilldog says, let's go, Hilldog. Emilio says, let's go, Emilio. Hilldog says, smash that like, delegate to AOS, stake pool, and DRep. Thank you for saying that, Hilldog. Appreciate it very much. Fly Over Me says, all day, every day. Let's go. At Cardano's here. Let's go, at Cardano. Good morning, Mission Zambia. At Cardano says, why is there a young Hitler speaking in the Senate? Fascism over communism. That is not a young Hitler. That is not a young Hitler. I did intentionally choose the a thumbnail where the faces were all grotesque, kind of grotesque to represent politicians generally. But I was more concerned that it looks like the head is on backwards on that one. But I kind of like this one because all the heads sort of look grotesque. Afro in the Wind says, let's go. 8 for the win eventually, we hope. Yep, Donkey Ned, I agree. 8 for the win. Brown Beardo says, let's go. Tribunal, hopefully not. Jay Marie, yo, thanks for joining, Jay Marie. Good to see you. Omar Wright is here. Hello, Omar. Joe Davis has made it and not going to gym tonight. I might be lazy. Fair enough. Otis Freechove, let's go. Otis Freechove's here. Let's go. Omar says, I thought I'd try and make it on time. Let's go. Thank you for making it on time. I appreciate it. Brown Beardo says, no one's ever seen Congress so full of politicians actually doing their jobs. That's a good point. This is way too many. This is way too many. This would be like, in the event of nuclear war or something like that, to have this many people. James Syracuse, thanks for joining. Brown Beard, oh God, I can't look at every single person's haircut. Can I forget to mention I smacked that like? Did you disclose that pic was made with AI? They're all obviously made with AI. All the thumbnails are definitely made with the AI. That has been the case for many years. Has it been years? Yeah, it's definitely been years, right? Jose Cano, hello. Thanks for joining. You can see the fascia behind him. Symbol for... I don't know. Either side of the flag. What? It just looks like decorative, like floral, floral type arrangement. Is that what it's like? Plants, vines growing up, golden vines. I don't know. This is what the AI image platform thinks the House of Representatives looks like. This is supposed to be the House of Representatives, apparently. So, anyways, let's get on with it. So the fact that we all look at this and see various things probably is a good representation of representative governance, right? The people are posting really funny things. Jay Marie says, I think I see Thomas Jefferson in the crowd. Let's go. Yeah, I like the idea of founding fathers in the crowd. I don't necessarily agree with some of the societal views that were in vogue at that time. But as far as governance goes, aside from some societal things going on, some good ideas among the founding fathers, I think. But I think it's good that people look at this photo and they see various things. When we look at the House of Representatives. But the thing that's most disturbing to me about governance these days is that so much of it is political theater, right? So we're going to talk about that both at sort of a micro Cardano level tonight. But more importantly, I think the more important political theater issue going on right now is what's going on in Washington and how that's going to impact the Clarity Act. I think that's the most important thing going on. We've always got our own little micro things going on in Cardano, and they're very important to us. But we've also got to deal with the macro stuff going on in the world. That's sort of like, you know, US policy is important, EU policy is important, the policies of other large nation states are important. Then we've got sort of global international relations events, geopolitical events. Those can also impact us in crypto. So we've got like sort of multiple nested fractals of this same political theater thing going on. And I'm not saying it's a new thing. Like it's always sort of been the case. I think politics have always sort of been a little bit of theater. It is distressing, though. When we're trying to get something done, like the Clarity Act, it's distressing that we have to deal with so much of this. So let's go from micro to macro. Let's go from Cardano to Clarity Act to global. Let's go in that order. So who are we kidding? This is okay. Who are we kidding? Thinking politicians would hand power to the people with honest legislation. Yeah, I mean, it's like, there's obviously a lot of corruption in politics, a lot of questions about how certain politicians have the amount of money in their bank accounts they do. I think those are all valid concerns. But it's also just the jockeying between parties. It's like the lack of intellectual honesty about things. It's like something happens and it's like, oh, now we've got to shut down the entire government, right? And there are people who would want to do it just for the symbolism, of a certain event. Those are certainly, I'm sure there's people who have that kind of valid thinking. But there's also a huge reason for one of the parties to want to shut down the government as much as possible this year because midterms are coming up, right? If the government shut down all year in 2025 or as much of the year as possible, that's going to impact midterms. The party that currently has the Senate, the House, and the executive branch, if they get a lot less done this year, that'll be a good thing for the other party to point at, and vice versa. The opposite party is going to say it was all because this party shut down the government. We've seen this before. This is not novel or new information. Okay, Fly Over Me says, who is that 3 rows down from the left, 4 seats to the right, and then 2 back? What? 3 rows down from the left. Okay, 3 rows down from the left. I'm just going to count seated people. So 3 rows down from the left, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 seats to the right, and then 2 back. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I can go 4 seats to the right from over here on the left. So I think I'm either misconstruing your directions or or it's kind of a funny commentary on how ridiculous this many people being in the House of Representatives would be. Stronger together, every representative symbolizes a group of citizens. Yep, that is definitely how representative government's supposed to work. Yeah, down with taxation without representation. That certainly launched this country. The source of the idea behind fascism. Yep, I knew that's where you're going with that. Professor of decentralization giving a lecture. Yeah, government close. What are the chances? We're going to talk about it. GMV15's here. Hey, thanks for joining. Otis Fricho says, I just get tired of hearing their first world problems where we live it every day. Yeah. Trolltol, hello. Thanks for joining. Emilio says, also, what are the chances for a better Clarity Act and then passing? We're going to talk about it. Rulo, thanks for joining. Hola. Government will close, government goons murdering citizens, fascism. Yeah, I mean, these are certainly the things that, are occupying the headlines right now. So we're not going to litigate any of the issues in Minneapolis on this video. That's kind of beyond the scope. But we are going to talk about how the turbulence is going to affect the Clarity Act. But first, like I said, we're going to go from micro Cardano level to Clarity Act level to global IR international relations level. So we're going to go in that order. So we've got a lot to cover. So this is going to be another one we're going to have to kind of scream through all these tabs because we've got a lot of tabs. Luckily, a lot of them I can just show you and we don't have to read a lot on them because you'll kind of understand what they are. So yesterday I tried to show you the markup, the tracked changes red line of our constitutional amendment, right? I couldn't show it to you because it wouldn't load, and I said I would try to take screenshots and show it to you. So that's why we're doing it tonight, just because I said I'd do it, so let's do it. And I've got more. It actually led to some more things. So I'll show you those things right now. So here we go. So obviously this thing is like 45 pages long. I'm not going to go through all 45 pages, but I wanted to show you one section that sort of exemplifies what I was talking about. So when you look at normal human editing, what it usually looks like is it looks like some human went in and changed a few words. They tweaked a few words. Sometimes they want to kill a whole sentence. They delete a whole sentence. Sometimes they change, just the operative words in a sentence. Sometimes they'll change a sentence that says the following thing is the case to the following thing is not the case. Those are the kinds of changes that humans actually make. So what humans don't usually do is drop some text in the middle. So this is like an island. You can call this an island of text. And in fact, the AIs that I had look at this that we're going to talk about in a second, they actually refer to this as an island. So humans don't usually drop an island of text and delete everything around it and then use a word like add a single word from the section they deleted back on to the part that they dropped in the middle of that text. That's a pretty unhuman way to do that, right? Humans don't do that. No way I can read that. I think there's a reason humans can't read it. I think there's a reason humans can't read it. So yeah, humans don't do this. They don't drop a little bit of text here and then go through this whole thing and then pick up the same sentence down here with a word down here. Humans don't do that. They don't drop something in here and then pick this up down here. So that's the first page of this. Then you come down here and you see the same thing. It's like, oh, we're going to drop some text in right here and then delete this and then pick this up, like this. It's like, this is not the way humans normally edit. I think the best example, you can see here, there's whole blocks that have just been deleted and then they've been moved somewhere else and completely rewritten, right? In some cases throughout this document. So I'm just showing you this as a representation of the things I'm talking about, but this is probably the best example. Here you have this sentence that's dropped in between a bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of stuff that's been deleted. And then you have these little words picked out here and there, that are not deleted because they match as the next word in the sentence. Then some more text is dropped in this island of text. Then, a couple words are used because they happen to be picked out as the next words. They're not deleted. And then everything else is deleted. And then the sentence picks back up down here, right? This looks like a certain thing that I've seen a lot before because I've seen a lot of documents like this that were edited by humans and were edited by AI. And when it looks like this, it's never humans. Right? It's never humans. So I was like, am I just imagining that? Because I've seen this a lot. And but I was like, you know what? We should go. There's somebody we can go ask. We can go ask some AIs. So I went and asked AI. So first thing I did is I was like, let's make sure that anything I've ever talked to Grok about before is not a part of this. So I asked Grok to forget everything we've talked about and just sort of review this anew. And I tried to ask the question in a pretty neutral way. I said, the Cardano Constitution was recently amended by a certain DRep. There's a question about whether or not he used an LLM to edit the document and how much. I'm going to link the original version of the Constitution. Then I'll send you another post that attaches screenshots of the track changes redline produced by the compare documents function in Google Docs. It will show the changes made in the amendment, and we'll start with the pages beginning around section 7 on page 10. Because I wanted to show Grok exactly what I just showed you, the exact same screenshots I just showed you, and I gave it a link to the original Constitution. If you want to do this yourself, you can just go to cardano.org/constitution, and there will be IPFS links to both the original Constitution and this new amendment, right? So you can do this exact same thing yourself. You can hit the compare docs button in Google Docs. You can paste them both into Google Docs, hit compare docs. You can put them both into Grok, into whatever LM you want. You can reproduce this on your own. So I said it will show the changes made in the amendment, and we'll start with the pages beginning around section 7 on page 10. Those are just the screenshots, so I could limit it exactly to the screenshots you just saw. Wait until after I post the screenshots and then analyze the track changes redline and tell me how much an LLM was used in the editing. Here's the original. Don't start until after I post the screenshots. It said, okay. Then I posted the screenshots. So here's what it said. The track changes screenshots from the DRep's proposed amendment show very strong indicators of extensive LLM involvement in the editing and rewriting process. Likely 70 to 90% of the substantive changes reflect AI-assisted drafting or heavy rewriting rather than purely manual human editing. This is what I expected, right? And then it goes through why it thinks this is the case. Wholesale section replacements with islands of preserved text. Large portions of the original text are almost entirely struck through in red, deletions replaced by entirely new blue inserted blocks. Amid these massive deleted regions, isolated words, short phrases, or common connectors, the, shall, of the, to the, and remain in plain black as unchanged. This is a classic artifact of diff algorithms like Google Docs and Word. That's when you hit the compare docs button when comparing a holistically AI rewritten version against the original. LLMs, when prompted to rewrite for clarity, consistency, structure, and conciseness, or reorganize into numbered lists, produce new versions that coincidentally reuse vocabulary in similar positions, fooling the diff tool into treating those. That's the compare docs button in Google Docs, fooling the diff tool into treating those fragments as preserved. Human editors rarely produce this patchy pattern. They make smaller targeted tweaks, resulting in more evenly distributed changes. That is exactly what I have seen. So highly uniform parallel structure and insertions. The new blue text features repetitive symmetrical phrasing, consistent shell clauses, numbered requirements, parallel bullet lists. It's going to go through all the reasons why it thinks this is likely 70, 90% of the substantive changes AI assisted, right? This isn't minor polishing. It's a comprehensive overhaul, adding verbosity, structure, and minor elaborations while preserving core meaning, and it goes into I wrote it neutral, so it does its best to tell me why it thinks this, how a single human could have possibly done this manually. It says a single human drafter could do this manually if you set out to imitate an LLM, I guess. But the diff artifacts and stylistic uniformity strongly suggest pasting in LLM generated rewrites, possibly iterated, as you'd expect. Overall, the editing fingerprints point overwhelmingly to heavy LLM reliance for restructuring and expanding major sections. And then it goes on to say it's not fully AI generated from scratch. We knew that because it's not fully AI generated from scratch because the original was written by the people of the Constitutional Convention. So we kind of know this is a thing that happens. Okay, let's see. Streetwise says this exact thing is happening. So sorry, Streetwise first said, hopefully our new partner Google has great news about their new selective disclosure privacy solution. Yeah, I would like that. This exact thing is happening in education. Teachers AI a worksheet and students AI the solution, just AI talking to itself. We're doomed. That happened to me on Twitter this week. I realized that I was talking to a human and I realized I was probably just talking to an AI. It was a real human, but they were just having the AI. I think they were pasting what the AI was writing as responses to me. There are two main ways to view text changes. Code diff tools show side-by-side blocks of text to view changes. Redline markup is a more common way to view text changes for non-code related files. Yeah, in legal documents, it is universal. It is universal. You were kind, not saying basically you didn't write it. I am addressing this in a certain way on X because I'm not the goal is not to hurt anybody's feelings or make anybody look bad, but we can't do this. The point is the point needs to be made that we can't actually do this. Feels like a whole week of document markup orthodoxy. Yep, definitely. So I thought I was like, okay, I told it to forget everything we wrote, but I should do this again in Grok and just do it in a brand new chat so that there's nothing else in the chat that could possibly be worrying about. So I had to do exactly the same thing, exactly the same prompt, exactly the same screenshots. And again, it goes through, its analysis. The track changes in the provided screenshots show extensive edits across multiple articles, heavy rephrasing, structural improvements, substantive additions, deletions, and consolidations. And it comes to the conclusion, the patterns strongly indicate extensive use of a large language model in the editing process. Likely 70 to 90% of the revised text bears hallmarks of LLM assistance. Here's the evidence-based reasoning. And then it goes through its reasons and the likelihood that this is human only, low, low to medium, low, medium. It does point out there aren't like, quirky hallucinations, right? We would have already spotted those though. So anyways, so that's Grok 2 different times saying 70 to 90% of the revised text bears hallmarks of LLM assistance, right? That's kind of what I expected. In this earlier one, same conclusion as 70 to 90%. So I was like, okay, let's see what ChatGPT says. So I went to ChatGPT, and just so you know, it was the exact same prompt, exact same screenshots, right? It shows them a little different because they're sort of 2-pagers, but it was the exact same prompts. And it kind of goes through the exact same. It goes through a similar. So it goes through a similar. It goes through a similar analysis, right? But then it asked an important question. So it says likelihood in LLM was used at least somewhat, 60 to 80%. How much the writing looks LLM assisted? Roughly 40 to 70% of the newly inserted phrasing, especially where long paragraphs were replaced with tidy bullet points and standardized policy language. It says, doesn't look like, the LLM did it all, but, this is just according to the screenshots and the link to the original. And it kind of went through a lot of the same rationale. But then it asked an important question. It was like, hey, do you just want to give me the whole compare docs, the whole red line? And let me look at the whole red line. So I was like, sure, here's the whole red line. So then it goes through the whole red line, gives its analysis here, gives a bunch of different examples, and it comes to a little bit different, a little bit more precise analysis. So it says, my best estimate, how much LLM? If we interpret how much as how much the editing work looks like LLM style rewriting versus human hand editing, likelihood an LLM was used at least as an editing assistant, 60 to 80% likely. How much the changed text could plausibly be LLM generated phrasing? A lot of it. Given the volume, I'd ballpark 50 to 70% of the inserted wording as consistent with LLM style rewrite output, especially the standardized clarify turn into bullets portion. But it's, they all kind of agree. It's not, there were humans involved in this, but they're all giving both the LLMs I asked about this are saying they think, probably a majority. This one came to the conclusion that of the newly inserted text, roughly 60 to 80%. Oh no, where is it? 50 to 70% of the inserted wording is consistent with LLM style rewrite output. So I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I thought when I looked at it. So that all makes sense. Post something and tag you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Feel free to tag me in it. Yep. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It's exactly what I thought when I looked at it. So what kicked this all off, like people might forget, what actually kicked this all off was that this has been going on for 6 months. People were asking today, why is there so much activity on this now? Not realizing this has been going on for 6 months. So back in August, I asked the question because I looked at it in August and I was like, this is AI. In my head, I was like, this looks like AI to me. So I just asked the question to the proposer. Were these edits done with AI? The answer was, I rely heavily on Google Translate. In that sense, AI has been a great help. However, and then he goes on to talk about all kinds of humans. He says, I also wrote my reply to you using Google Translate. And I was like, I took that at face value and I was like, okay, great. Google Translate is different to me than, this whole rewrite having been done by an LLM. I'll just take this at face value. And, I'm still voting no because I don't like the substance of the edits. I voted no, and this was my thread explaining it, explaining why I was voting no. And then the proposer popped on and I just asked the question, how much this is AI. So I took it at face value. Google Translate, there was no mention of LLMs and there was mention of a lot of humans, right? English speaking DReps, legal experts, lots of talk about humans. and talk about more humans in the future. I plan to check it again, but in any case, the help of native English speakers would be greatly appreciated. So he's looking for even more humans. I was like, okay, humans and Google Translate. That's okay. I'm in favor of Google Translate. I myself use it all the time. So then we get January 2026, where we find out I was like, man, I know I was told this was Google Translate, but this really doesn't feel like Google Translate. This is after I voted no in November, no again in January. And I was like, you know what? I can't believe this thing passed, but this doesn't feel right. This after I got the response on X that looked like it was pure copy and paste, LLM response to me, I was like, wait a second. I was told this was Google Translate, but I have a feeling the Constitution also had a decent dose of LLM in it. So I asked the question again, and all of a sudden, it's not just Google Translate that's mentioned. It's ChatGPT, Grok, and Gemini. So I want to be very specific. I wanted, specification here. So one or more of ChatGPT, Grok, and or Gemini was used to rewrite the Constitution, right? The answer was like, yes, I use all of that. But of course, the walking of that back begins already. I'm not copying and pasting the results. How do you verify it? Even if you could, what logical relevance does it have to this discussion? So it's like, yes, I did use those, but then the walking back, starts. And, the walking back is basically, this was like, when was this? Like last week, before the weekend. And then the walking back from that has basically been happening, for the last week. Until we got to this, it's like a lot more walking back. The LLMs did not contribute to the substantive additions or deletions of articles of text. I mean, this is what I expect, right? It's like if you just wrote a constitution and you didn't say anything about using an LLM, this is what I expect to see. I thought this part was pretty funny, though. I asked an LLM. So this is the proposer of this amendment. I asked my LLM whether it was true that LLM did not contribute to the deletion or addition of the text. And he replied that it was. So he's saying he asked his own, and I've never mentioned to this proposer what what Grok or ChatGPT said about his draft and his changes. He just kind of contributed this out of the blue, and he's saying that he asked his LLM if he used an LLM to delete or add text, and his LLM told him no. So, I mean, this is what you expect, right? If any politician is in this position, this is what you expect to see, right? Even if they say this, I used ChatGPT, Grok, and Gemini, you're going to expect a lot of walking back, and of course, we all know you can get any LLM to eventually tell you what you want by prodding and prompting it and, pushing it in a certain direction. You can get it to say whatever you want. So this is exactly what I expect, right? This is what you're going to see no matter what. It was always going to lead here, I ran my work through an LLM, and my LLM confirms what I've been telling everybody. So this was earlier today. I think just a few hours ago. Was this just a few hours ago? Yeah, this was earlier today, just several hours ago. But I thought eventually we'd get to this point, which is, of course, this is like expected. So that's about where I thought this was going to go, no matter what. So, I mean, that's about all I can say. This is about all I can say about this whole constitutional amendment. So the reason why I brought this up and I wanted to make sure people knew about this was because I don't think we should do this in the future. I don't think we should be doing these gigantic revisions of the Constitution, control, and have the revision orchestrated by the biggest DRep, and have some amount of, LLM work going on, and nobody knows about it. I don't think this is a good way to do this. I wanted to make it clear to everybody this was not a good way to do this. And the reason is because I think the draft sucks. I think the amendment sucks. I wrote huge articles about it. Somebody even, asked me about how that relates to Marbury versus Madison, the most important constitutional decision ever. I even went through that, how it sucks from a Marbury versus Madison perspective. I wrote a whole treatment of that, right? So I think the whole thing sucks. I think the whole draft sucks. And when something sucks, right? When as an organizational entity, when as a group, when we all do something that sucks, I voted against it, but as a group, the DReps approved it. And so I was like, we have to look at why this happened. When something sucks, you can't just be like, oh, that sucked, move on. You have to ask, okay, the end result sucked. Why did it suck? And then I started looking at the process, and I was like, okay, there was no red line. That was part of the problem. There seems to have been a lot of LLM busyness on this draft. People, obviously, you can see people disagree about how much LLM work went into it, but some amount, everybody agrees there was some amount. Right here, yes, I use all that. So I'm like, okay, the end result sucked, and here's why I think the process sucked, because there was no red line. We couldn't track the changes. An LLM was used to rewrite the entire Constitution. We went from like 8 articles down to 4 articles. Everything was reordered, reorganized, renumbered, so you couldn't follow anything. And instead of things being done piecemeal, like let's all vote on whether to change this section of the Constitution, and then we'll work on other sections. It was all done at once. So the end result was, and there was no disclosure that any LLM was involved whatsoever, at least not that I saw. I never saw any disclosure about LLMs. And the proposer has been debating with me whether or not disclosure was necessary. My question to him all along has been, why wouldn't you want to disclose? What's the cost of disclosing? You just have to say, hey, everybody, look closely at this. LLMs were involved in the production of this draft. Those are a few words. It doesn't cost you anything. What's the cost of disclosing? There's no cost to disclosing. So I've asked that question multiple times, even today in our ongoing discussions, and I couldn't get an answer. I could not get an answer of what is the problem? What's the big problem with disclosing? Disclosing is free. It's not a problem at all. It doesn't create any problems. You just disclose, and then everybody knows. And all the DReps would have scrutinized this draft differently if they had all known, hey, LLMs were involved in the production of this. They probably would have looked at it much more closely. So this is why I think this was such a big deal. We have to look at, what went wrong with the process, because the end result definitely sucked from my perspective anyways. Maybe some people like the end result. I didn't. So I thought it was important to look at the process. Anyways, that's why we've spent so much time on that. But now let's go to the macro. Let's talk about the important stuff. That's all micro Cardano stuff, which is very important to us. But let's go a level higher. Let's go to a slightly higher level macro now. Let's go to the Clarity Act. So Brown Beardo says Emilio. Okay, let's go. I need to go a little higher. Let's see. Sorry about that, guys. Streetwise says, I appreciate using dark mode, a man of culture. Thank you. I'm definitely all the time dark mode. The thing I screw up that people get mad about is occasionally I'll go to like Wikipedia or Grokpedia. And in Wikipedia, it switches to light mode. So apologies for that when it happens. Brown Beardo says, in my opinion and experience, if it was purely Google Translate, the draft would be a lot rougher. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's admitted that the LLMs were used to suggest insertions, and the LLMs were asked about proposed deletions. But then there's this walking back, and it's like, but none of those made it into the text. But as soon as I saw it, I immediately knew, and there's also talk about humans being involved, like we just looked at. There's talk about humans being involved. But yeah, if it was all Google Translate, the draft would have been a lot rougher for sure. Can we rewrite the Constitution? I don't know that it would pass, because so of the 4.5 some odd billion votes for this, like 1.4 billion of them were the proposer of this amendment, Emergo and Yoroi Wallet. They made up 1.4 billion or something out of the 4.5 billion yes votes. So if you do another amendment, hey, we're going to undo exactly what you guys just did and voted for. I don't think they'd vote for it. So I'm not sure it would pass. I'm not sure it would actually, I don't think it would actually pass. Streetwise, really important work you're doing here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I've not been following this issue that closely, but maybe the proposer could provide a red line markup version of the changes to help people understand his rationale for each change. Better late than never. So he did. There was a whole long discussion between me and him. Actually, going back also to August. Going back to August, I've been begging him for a red line. And this month, after 3 votes and it finally passing, just a couple of days ago, I was like, dude, all you gotta do is hit the track change button before you start making changes, or hit the compare docs button afterwards. So finally, he put it into he put his draft and the original into Google Docs, I believe, and hit compare documents. So he's put that on Twitter. You can go look at it. But even better, just go to cardano.org/constitution, and you can get links to both documents there. Just punch them into 2 different docs in Google Docs, and just hit the compare docs button. So you can do your own. I mean, that's exactly what I did. He did the same thing, and that's exactly what I did here. Like, the screenshots you saw were from my version of it. I actually tried to show that document on the stream last night, and the streaming software doesn't like you loading a 45-page document full of red lines, apparently. So that's why we saw screenshots of it tonight. But those screenshots tonight were exactly what you're describing. Matt says redact. Yep. Yes, it's a living document, but strategically, it would be better to follow a targeted approach to fix problems in multiple amendments. Yep. Because the problem is the DReps don't have the time, because the DReps aren't paid. Nobody's paid. So nobody has time to read through a whole document. So it's just not going to get done. People are just going to go into tempo vote or something and see how everybody else is voting, and they're going to vote that way. That's what's going to happen. And that's what happened here for many, many DReps. I can guarantee you there are some who definitely read it, but many, many DReps just looked and said, which way is the wind blowing? So good. I hope we do that. Yep. Let's see. Sketchy voting. Yeah, absolutely. At Cardano, absolutely. My pleasure. Sketchy voting. Yeah, I mean, it's we can't really blame them, because, it's the same thing in like pretty much any parliament around the world, the US Congress. It's the same thing. The bills are just too big and there's not enough time. I mean, hell, the congressmen get paid. They get paid, a healthy salary, enough. They get paid enough to do it, and they still don't read the bills. Granted, their bills are like 500 pages, but Cardano DReps, they just don't have time to read through that. So I agree. We actually need to do things like this piecemeal, and we just need to do, change, one concept at a time. We can't go through. What'll happen if we keep doing it like this? If people keep using LLMs to rewrite the whole Constitution, you could eventually just keep doing that. I mean, a lot of people were arguing over the last week that this is a whole new constitution, that it's not even the same constitution. But I mean, that will happen if we do this like several times, and LLMs are, involved in, I'm trying to be charitable here. If LLMs are involved in rewriting the Constitution, and we do it over and over again, and the DReps never read it, we will end up with something that's like unrecognizable. So, and that was my problem with this initially, is it degraded a lot of the language around checks and balances. It even deleted the words. The words checks and balances were in the old Constitution. They're no longer in the new Constitution. That's the red flag that should have put everybody on notice. But I saw not a single person talk about that prior to this passing. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get the attention to detail that would be required. I think what we need is just for people to embrace making small changes to the Constitution instead of these big changes, because nobody's going to pay attention to the big changes. To these changes, when you change like a million things, nobody's going to be able to go through all those changes. So we should do it piecemeal. Yep, absolutely. Nope. Streetwise posted something. Nope, please do not do that. Please do not do that. Frazek says, in order for people to change their vote, they would first have to admit they made a mistake. Most people, yeah, that's a big part of the problem. There was a lot of resistance to even the discussion about any of this stuff, because everybody voted for it. Like almost everybody voted for it, and nobody wants to admit they didn't, understand. So everybody's like, yeah. People are kind of like, yeah, I wanted us to erase the words checks and balances from the Constitution. And I'm like, what? No, you didn't. That's a lie. But people will embrace that lie because they don't want to admit they didn't read the damn thing. Let's see. The constitutional change was mentioned on the midnight live stream briefly. Oh, interesting. Okay. What I'm hoping to see for red line changes, though, is for justification reasoning to be provided for each change. It doesn't sound like that level of detail was provided for each change. I mean, there was a little bit. If you look at the governance action, and Twitter, there's been some explanation. A lot of it was just like, we wanted it to be simpler. We wanted it to be more streamlined, which is, there's validity to wanting things to be simpler, but, with constitutional text, there's legal considerations that sometimes trump, the desires for compactness and streamlining. So maybe that's the best way to put it. Brian Packard, thanks for joining. You can come late anytime. Do not use is always an in-depth discussion. Call it something new and improved. They should be fine. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure this won't be the last amendment of the Constitution. Obviously, if Roy is in favor of something like this, I must question. So yeah, I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm definitely not trying to call I'm not trying to call out any of the DReps who voted in favor of this. But I think the process was not good on this. That probably the best thing I can say is the process wasn't good on this. But okay, let's jump into what's going on in Congress. So you might have seen posts like this. It's official. There will be no shutdowns in the United States of America. Bullish for crypto. So this went around today. Unfortunately, this was not from today. So this went around. Everybody celebrated. No shutdown. Woohoo. Good. All kinds of emojis, run it up, all the things you'd expect. This thing got 500,000 views, 750 retweets, 325 comments, right? This was not from today. This was prior. This poster, who got one bookmark, 5,000 views, says that video was from earlier in the week, last week. The House passed the bill. Now it has to go to the Senate. The Senate says they will not vote on the bill unless the funding for DHS is removed. So it looks like we are on the brink of another government shutdown, right? Why does this suck for us? Because we're trying to get the damn Clarity Act passed. There's a government shutdown. That kind of killed our Q4, right? Government shutdown killed, I would argue, H2. It killed H2. So if we have another shutdown, maybe Charles's prediction turns out to be right. That if there's a lot of shutdown in between now and midterms, it's possible that Charles's prediction comes true. And his prediction, I won't say it was his prediction. I'll say he was discussing the possibility that we don't get this thing passed before midterms. And if we don't get it passed before midterms, it's possible we don't get this until, 2029. So we really need to get the Clarity Act passed before midterms. But at the same time, we don't want this terrible banker-oriented Clarity Act. So this is a tightrope we're walking. We could end up getting fucked on this. We could end up getting super fucked on this if we don't pass a Clarity Act by midterms and the anti-crypto army takes over the goddamn House and the Senate. Then we might get fucked on this and not get a Clarity Act until a much later date we will not appreciate. So this is a possibility, and we're kind of walking a tightrope. Hey, this is Hot Fries. Hey, AOS, help me understand why we don't change it back to the original constitutional text. I don't think we get enough votes, because I think the three largest DReps, I think they will vote against it. And I think a lot of other DReps will vote against it. Like who was it who pointed it out? Somebody up above pointed out that, yeah, Frazak pointed out most people have difficulty admitting they made a mistake. A lot of DReps didn't even want to entertain the discussion because they voted for it, and they don't want to be embarrassed by having voted for something that sucks. So they just kind of pretend like it was good and the process was good. Have you ever looked into the 21 trillion missing dollars that Catherine Austin Fitts, the ex-assistant housing secretary in the Bush administration, has been talking about all over the place lately? So I've seen this. I don't know the answer. I don't know if how much veracity is there. I have no idea. It's fascinating though. The thought that it's true is fascinating. I would love to see more on that. I don't want to go down any crazy conspiracy rabbit holes, especially because this is such like this goes back so far. But it's fascinating. I agree. Daniil says, disappointed on the people defending the constitutional changes. They want to be in the good side of. I'm afraid so. I mean, I've said this many times, but you've probably noticed a lot of the DReps have their own projects going on of various types, and they're trying to get money for those projects. So a lot of the DReps are in some way tied to some project that's trying to get money either out of the treasury or out of Catalyst, right? And so it's kind of this thing where like they don't want to piss everybody off, so they just vote yes for everything. They just like vote yes for everything because they can't risk pissing somebody off who might vote no when it's their turn to dig their hand into the treasury bag, right? It's like everybody wants to take their turn digging some gold out of the treasury pot. And so they just vote yes on everything because they don't want to piss anybody off. I mean, this is actually how a lot of governance works. You'll notice this is very true in the Senate and the House of Representatives and, parliaments kind of worldwide. It's like everybody is representing special interests. So they kind of just like vote yes on a bunch of dumb shit because they also want to do dumb shit. And, in some way that benefits them financially. So that's the thing. There's a lot of really good DReps who aren't like that also. So this is not a universal thing at all. There's a lot of really good DReps who aren't like that and are really passionate about Cardano governance. But there's a lot who are just voting yes on everything also. So it's also less work for them. If they just look at how everybody else is voting and vote that way, super easy. Go in, go in every once in a while and just, how's everybody voting? I'll just vote that way. Cool, done. And then they don't piss anybody off. But obviously that's not the way to do it. So Grok points out the vote session in the video is from January 22nd. It's on this bill, HR 7148, Consolidated Appropriations Act 2026, which passed 31 to 88. And you notice in the video, that is the right vote, 341 to 88. So this is just the House. This is not official. This is not the official word. There will be no shutdowns. And we actually are in danger of the Senate not voting on the bill because of their wanting to defund DHS, basically. So if that happens, political theater, once again, is going to be a problem for us on this level. So here is Polymarket's chance of a shutdown this Saturday. Unfortunately, extremely fucking high, according to Polymarket. The chance is extremely fucking high, according to Polymarket, that things go badly for us here. So hopefully Polymarket is wrong and we can pull this out. But if we get a government shutdown and it lasts and it's another record breaker like last time, we might be slightly fucked, guys. Frazik says, a thing Cardano holder can do is see how their DRep voted and hold them to account. Yeah, I mean, like a really interesting thing. One of the best comments a lot of people made was, why did we do this? Why did we amend the Constitution? Like, ask your DRep why they voted yes. And I don't think a lot of them are going to have a good explanation. I guarantee you the explanation is going to sound something like, oh, there were a lot of extra provisions in the Constitution that we didn't need. So we were just deleting all of them. That's what they're going to say because, they're going to say we needed to streamline the Constitution. But if you ask them like, why though? They're not really going to have an explanation. They're going to be like, oh, shorter's better. Brevity is golden. Those kind of, they're going to give you something like that. But I have yet to hear a good explanation of why we fucking needed to amend it in the first place. I haven't heard like a good rationale for the amendment that wasn't something very minor like that. Like, oh, we just needed to make it shorter. We needed to simplify it. Those kind of things. Both parties are working on a revised Clarity Act by Friday. I hope so. So we can talk about that actually right now. So the Ag Committee has rescheduled its crypto market structure markup for 10:30 a.m. on Thursday. So you remember we got that draft last week. And the draft was basically a draft that no Democrat had agreed to. It was a Republican only draft because they couldn't come up with a draft that, the senior Democrats on the other side of the ag committee actually liked. So we'll see what goes down on Thursday and Friday. I think I saw Friday. It's either Thursday or Friday, but at the end of the week, we're going to see something. But as of a few days ago, they hadn't agreed on anything. So we'll see what progress they've made in the last week. But it's like, the good thing we got going on here, though, is that the White House is pushing the people on the right of the aisle. He's pushing them pretty hard on the Clarity Act, or at least he was. He's trying to fulfill that campaign promise to us. So that's good. That's helpful. If the White House didn't give a damn, I would be real worried. The fact that the White House is going to push everybody pretty hard is good, but also you can also question how much control the White House has over the Senate, even the senators on the right now. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. We're going to see something happen at the end of this week, but it's like, even if the Ag Committee does something good, the Banking Committee is still going to do their thing, and they've already kind of told us like, oh, we moved on to housing. So a lot is going to hinge on whether or not we get another record-breaking shutdown, unfortunately, because if we do, we might be a little bit fucked, guys. Hot Fries says living with broken text in the Constitution is not a good solution. I agree. I very much agree. That's why I put so much energy into this, right? I put so much energy. I actually didn't think it was going to pass. So I voted no. And then at the very end, there wasn't enough to pass. And then at the very last minute, a large entity, again, I'm not going to name names. You can look it up, though. A large entity came in with their vote of like $250 million. It wasn't one of the top three either, but a large entity that hadn't voted yet came in with their vote of like $250 million and pushed it over the line on the last day. It wasn't going to pass. So I didn't think we'd have to have this conversation because the first two did not pass. I thought the third wouldn't pass, and it fucking passed in the last second. So yeah, not a good result. I agree. Howdy, Dr. Doak. Thanks for joining. Cardano says, I wonder how we fix the issue. Employ professionals from the Treasury. Yeah, we got to do something. I wish the norm was just like greater scrutiny, but unfortunately, it's more like everybody just voting yes to everything. So we got to do something. I admire the stick it to-ness here, but Cardano just dying a really slow death. Not a hater. I don't want the shit to work out, but reality set in. I'd be happy to be wrong. Yeah, we're hurting right now. We're hurting right now in all of crypto, though. It's not just Cardano. Like Bitcoin's great because they got so much Wall Street adoption, but the rest of crypto is really, really hurting. So explain how the DRep voting thing is not an example of extreme centralization. In terms of the voting power, I'm afraid it fucking is. I'm afraid it is. There's a lot of voting power centralized in the top 3 DReps. I did a whole post about this. I went through how many of the like number 5 through, I forget the numbers, but it was like if you take the number 5 through 11 DReps and the number 17 through like 50, like that's how much voting power the top DReps have. So unfortunately, there's an extreme centralization of voting power in the top DReps. So I hate to say that. I wish it wasn't true. It's fucking true. Yeah, but states get representation in Congress based on population, and then each also gets a senator. Why don't we two? Oh, why don't we like also? Because we don't have proof of human. It's a plutarchy. So Cardano governance, at least with the DReps, is a plutarchy. It's just based on your holding of assets because we don't have a concept of proof of human in Cardano. People push for that. People say that's the only solution. It's definitely a wildly different form of governance versus plutarchy. It's a wildly different form of governance. So those are two very different things. And right now we have plutarchy. At least holders can choose a new DRep instantly. That's true. That helps. DRep does not equal deep. True. Both ag and fin serve working bipartisanly. Fucking helpful. Fucking massively helpful. Actually, like, it's like if the way those committees were working with each other was as polarized and partisan as sort of Congress at large, we would be super fucked. So, you know, hopefully they can get together on this. Hopefully they can get together on this. So far, the ag committee, though, you notice that draft they gave us, it wasn't like the banking committee draft. The banking committee draft was bipartisan, which meant that the dragon had her green claws all over it, unfortunately. But ag committee couldn't even get that. They just gave us the Republican draft. So I hope they can get it together. I hope they do work bipartisanly on this. Cardinal holders can easily change DREP, so at least holders have a bit more power. True. So you're not going to get that though in those top DREPs because they are those top DREPs. They're at least how do I put this? So their delegators are centralized in a country where you don't have very many people who are going to be even experiencing any of this conversation going on in English. So they're not even seeing these posts, in English, these kind of videos in English. They're not seeing any of this stuff. So the chances of them moving is pretty low, unfortunately. Specificity is golden when it's your ass or your dollars. Yep. Needs to be fixed. Egos are not a good excuse, like driving with a flat tire and the rest of the world can see it. Yep. In my opinion, DREPs should be paid. Names accountability as a necessity. It creates an incentive for more to become DREPs. It's decentralizing the voting power. Yeah, if anything would decentralize the voting power, it'd probably be a good thing for sure. So the more ADA is delegated to a DREP, the more their vote is worth. Yeah, it's 100% correlated to the amount delegated to them. Like they literally get a vote. Like you can think of it as every ADA. It's like every Lovelace, but yeah, they get it's basically a vote. You can think of it as a vote for every Lovelace. So, or ADA, however you want to cognize it. Yeah, I agree with this. I agree with Omar on this. I mean, the BTC guys have been saying that since I've been in crypto. Like they've been saying that since 2012, 2013. So they've been saying that all along. Oh, you're saying makes accountability a necessity. Yep, I agree. The rich fill their pockets over the backs of the poor. What else is new? Yeah, true. Gonna pirate your content and only translate it using Google Translate. I guess in that case, given the context of the conversation, you just translate it using an LLM and then don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody you use an LLM. Just say it was all Google Translate. So not saying that's what happened here, just saying that's a possibility. Thank you. Thank you, Flower Me. I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you saying that. I was kind of shocked that there weren't like, 100 DReps saying the same thing I was. But they all voted yes. So not all of them, but huge number. I'll ask my Tanil says, I'll ask my LLM. Yeah, there you go. So I mean, we've got the worst part is the thing we have to overcome with I talked about this when this first came out. I talked about this when this first came out. Oh, here's a funny comment. They've been saying only BTC and ETH will survive since 2009, since before 2009. For anybody who doesn't understand, that would be before the Genesis block and long before Ethereum. But basically, it feels like they've been saying it. They've been saying it that long for sure. So the bad thing about this government shutdown and us being basically the hostage of the political theater is that what we've got to overcome is really just a fucking problem for Coinbase. It's not really a problem for the rest of us. Like Coinbase is going to get this shit regardless. Like they're going to have this. They're going to have this at the end of the day regardless. And it's just sort of like them fighting with the banks. I mean, it like barely, Coinbase is correct. Of course, it's better for consumers if the banks have to compete with stablecoin yield. That's better for consumers. But in the short term, it's kind of a separate issue. And Coinbase is correct. But in the short term, it's like if this is going to cause us to not get clarity on asset categorization until 2029. Part of me is also like, okay, Coinbase, you go work on your shit separately. Like, let us get through the door on the shit that crypto really, really needs. And you go have your, rich guy fight with the bankers on the side. We'll all watch you guys have that fight, but just let us do our shit over here and you guys fight your shit out over there. Right. Yeah, I agree. That is classic. So, but he is right. Paul Graywall, as always, is right here. No question, there is zero evidence, that stablecoin interest yield or rewards destabilizes the banking system. There is tons of evidence that they provide real competition to banks. Those are two very different things. It's all correct. Coinbase is totally right. They're in the right here. But unfortunately, from a pragmatic Machiavellian perspective, I would also tell them to go fight their fight separately, because we got bigger fish to fry in terms of just not being fucking securities. That's slightly more important than your stablecoin shit. So I wish they'd fight that out separately. I get totally why they know that if they don't attach this to our shit, it's not going to get through. So I get why they're doing what they're doing. It's perfectly logical, but it sucks for us. And it's not their fault. It's the banker's fault. So, okay, moving up to another level. We've gone from micro Cardano stuff. We've gone to Clarity Act, national policy level. Now let's talk about some international relations stuff. Let's talk about some geopolitical stuff, which will also impact markets, which impacts us at the national and Cardano level, at the crypto level, at the Cardano level, at all of our different nation states levels. Let's talk about this because, it's very interesting and it impacts all of us. So you probably already saw this, but this is the chief of NATO, the same one that had the discussion with Trump about the Greenland thing. You can feel however you want about that. But he does say something interesting here. He says, if anyone thinks, again, that the EU can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. And this shouldn't be looked at as like a pejorative thing about the EU. I think the important part of this is just how closely tied the US and the EU are, right? We kind of pretend like we're, sometimes we pretend like we're cousins who hate each other, on sort of a national policy level, because we do have different perspectives on policy, but we're very closely tied. The EU and the US are very closely tied, and especially as goes national security, right? When's the last thing we did, either the EU, or the US, that didn't involve the other? You know what I mean? The last military action that didn't involve the other. It's been a long time, guys. Our foreign policies are very closely tied. Sometimes we disagree, but he's right. As far as security goes, our policies are very closely tied, right? So all this like political theater, about the US no longer, being a part of NATO, no longer defending Europe. You can even argue, of course, many people on the US side are arguing that's desirable to them. But the one thing you can't argue is that the history of our security has been very deeply tied. And so he's right about this. Our security policies are very deeply tied, even if we disagree about things. Omar says yield is pretty indispensable. Only thing committees don't say they are addressing. Yeah, no, I agree. Yield is pretty indispensable. ADA not being a security is also indispensable. If ADA is declared a security and there's no path to being a commodity, that's, that classification as a commodity is pretty indispensable to us as well. So here's the big thing that is, there's probably going to be some pretty big fireworks about this, maybe this weekend, but this is going on, right? So finally, the USS Abraham Lincoln has arrived off the coast of Oman. So there was a super carrier there, a carrier strike group. There are destroyers with it. There's almost always a nuclear sub with it as well. This is, you can think of it as on the order of 90 aircraft, highly capable fighters, growlers that have electronic warfare capabilities, jamming. They are used to fighting drones, as in the 12-day war. Like, you know, this is a significant change. This is a significant change in what was going on. We kind of followed the route from the Philippines in the middle of the month through the Malacca Strait, in between the Maldives and Sri Lanka, and now they are all the way up in the Gulf of Oman, which was the final destination. So you can see there was even some confirmation. There was some flight tracking data that showed a flight path like this. So that lets you know that the origin location, or vice versa, I don't know which way it was going, was right there. So we saw this from CENTCOM. Sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln perform routine maintenance as the aircraft carrier sails in the Indian Ocean, January 26. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is currently deployed to the Middle East to promote regional security and stability. Obviously, they're not trying to be overly descriptive about their exact location, because meanwhile, the clerical regime in Tehran is like posting videos simulating their, supposed planned hypersonic strike on the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is, something something that the U.S. would react to pretty violently. 8 Eclipse has 3 days until something massive. Yeah, we don't know. I mean, things are definitely building up. In fact, if you want to see what so not only we've talked quite a bit about the sort of the naval buildup, there's also a lot of U.S. Air Force activity. So this thread says 8 U.S. Air Force transports destined or departing Fort Hood for missions eventually to Europe and beyond. The implication is these transports are picking up air defense equipment. Fort Hood is host to the 69th Air Defense Artillery Brigade. So obviously, as we've discussed, we've got a ton of bases around the Arabian Peninsula, in Iraq, Syria, right? Ton of U.S. defense installations. We've got a bunch of allies all over the Arabian Peninsula. There's Israel. And what we know is that whenever anything happens with Iran, they launch a bunch of drones and a bunch of missiles. So we've got to have air defense in order to defend our own facilities, our allies, all those things. So this is what they're talking about. We've also got a storm going on. So they mentioned down here, let's see, the weather is impacting the ability to land safely due to freezing rain in the area. So we've got a bunch of inclement weather from Texas all the way up to the mid-Atlantic that's impacting this. I have a feeling what I'm seeing online is a lot of reports that there are something like, 4 more loads that need to go over that haven't gone just because of the weather. Yeah. Cool. So we get to topple Maduro and Khomeini before the Epstein files. Wasn't on my bingo card. Yeah, it's kind of wild. The way things are playing out is kind of wild. I decided to go to the gym, says Joe Davidson. Yeah, so here's an updated version of this list, and this account up here is talking about the strength of the naval air assets that are involved in this. So this post has a good point, not very commonly reported. The Pacific-focused air wing filled some of the most advanced capability in the U.S. Navy. F-35Cs on deck, EA-18Gs with operational AN ALQ-249s, next-generation jammers. This is the electronic warfare we talked about earlier, Growlers, AIM-174, and probably a whole host of classified capability. We found out about that in Venezuela, classified capabilities. A lot of press was made about that. So this is the updated list of everything in the region here, and you can see pretty significant. Lot of ordnance carried on all these ships. These are destroyers and submarines and littoral craft. And here's the Abraham Lincoln Strike Carrier Group. I keep trying to point out, though, last time when we were able to very capably defend our allies and installations in this region, we had 2 carrier strike groups, and we had a huge number of destroyers and other ships. So, we'll see. We'll see if things kick off this weekend, or if, they're going to have another carrier strike group somehow steam over from, some other part of the world, some other command, and get into the CENTCOM area of responsibility. We'll see what happens, but who knows? Things could kick off this weekend. Ooh, 8 Eclipse says we are at the end of the 75-day countdown. Okay, let's go see if he posted anything. If there's anything going on, if anything is actually hitting here, or if not, or if he even addresses it. I'll be very interested to see. Streetwise says, yeah, at Brown Beardo. But if we're Europe's dad, we can tell them what to do. If they have to defend themselves, they're going to get leverage. They're going to get leverage in international negotiation. Yeah, I mean, it's always this weird, convoluted thing. Europe and the United States negotiating because the national security thing is always hanging in the background. It's always kind of weird. Dolphy Wolf, thank you for joining. Good morning. So one thing, Europe and the U.S. always sort things out, right? Europe and the U.S. always eventually sort things out. Like I said, our national security policies, in their case, European security policies, are so tightly bound together. It's like, we always manage to work it out. So I think this is all the news. For today. I think we've hit all the high spots. I'm hoping things work out with the ag committee later this week. More importantly, probably at that level, is that we don't get a government shutdown. And if we do, hopefully it's very short, not a record breaker like the last one, because we could be in some serious trouble if we have another record breaker government shutdown. That could be very bad. We'll see. Things are very, very polarized right now. Maybe even, it's hard to imagine that things could be more polarized than last year, but we might be at that level. So we'll see what goes on. This is probably going to be a pretty pivotal week, probably the next couple of weeks, where things are either going to go in a good direction or not in a good direction. So we'll see what goes down. So if we get a government shutdown this weekend, and also the U.S. striking Iran, it's going to be an action-packed weekend. So Brown Beardo says, I agree. That has been the prevailing strategy. We've accumulated a hell of a lot of debt. It's fair to take a hard look. If all that investment is necessary, why not reduce margins? Okay. We're at IR, means we're almost done for today. That's right. IR always ends the video lately. What is U.S. defense budget at the moment? Very high. I don't know. We should look up the number. I don't know what the actual, I would be wrong if I tried to guess the number, but it's incredibly high. Thanks, at Cardano. Thanks for joining. I appreciate everybody for being here. Omar, have a great night. Thank you for joining as always. So I hope everybody is starting out a great week, and I will talk to you soon.